Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. As you can see, I have been trying to address subjects besides Greater West Asia and the U.S. presidential race, and that will continue with this episode of my podcast. Here, I will talk about a recent executive order by U.S. President Joe Biden on immigrants, illegal immigrants, supposedly. I don't like that term illegal. Undocumented, even that I don't like very much. I would just prefer to call them immigrants coming across the border. But I realize that in the context of the U.S., undocumented workers, illegal immigrants, those terms are commonly used. That is why I have said on many occasions that I feel sometimes that the Statue of Liberty, which was given to the United States by France, France was the US's first ally, should be returned to France with a letter of apology. That is about as explicit as I will get in terms of critiquing that particular aspect of it. But now I will go ahead and read you the story. It's from CNN, written by Elise Hammond and Michelle Shen. The article is titled, Biden Announces Executive Action, an executive order, in other words, on immigration. Biden administration will bar asylum seekers illegally crossing the border. So here's the article. The Biden administration plans to invoke new authority, immediately borrowing migrants who cross the U.S.-Mexico border illegally from seeking asylum, senior officials said Tuesday, taking new steps to stem the flow of illegal migration after a bipartisan proposal stalled in Congress earlier this year. The new executive action would bar migrants who cross the border illegally from seeking asylum, a departure from decades-long protocol, once a daily threshold is met. Unless they meet certain exemptions, they will be turned away to Mexico or returned to their origin country. Senior administration officials told reporters Tuesday it will be lifted when there's a daily average of less than 1,500 encounters in between ports of entry. The action will not ban people based on their religion. It will not separate kids from their mothers. There are also narrow humanitarian exemptions to the bar on asylum, including to those facing an acute medical emergency or an imminent and extreme threat to life and safety. The Trump administration's actions did not include those exemptions, one official said. On a call with reporters Tuesday previewing the new action, one official defended the steps as separate and apart from those of the Trump administration, while acknowledging they're prepared for legal challenges, frankly, from both sides of the political spectrum. Here is another article that is related to it on the same page. And again, I will put a link to this as usual at the top of the discussion section below this video. This article is titled, Trump Campaign Criticizes Biden's Expected Immigration Executive Action, and it is by Kate Sullivan. The Trump campaign criticized the executive action that President Joe Biden is expected to announce Tuesday, which is today, that would effectively shut down the U.S.-Mexico border to asylum seekers crossing illegally when a daily threshold of crossings is exceeded. Trump campaign spokeswoman Caroline Leavitt said in a statement, "Let's be clear. Joe Biden's executive order is for amnesty, not border security. Some context. The executive action described to CNN by multiple people briefed on the order would mark a significant attempt by Biden to address head-on one of his biggest political vulnerabilities, just 2 weeks before the first presidential debate with Trump. Trump has made hardline immigration policies a cornerstone of his campaign and regularly stokes fears about migrants entering the U.S. I'll come back to all that stuff. Want to read one more brief story. This one is by Priscilla Alvarez and Donald Judd. It is titled Unaccompanied Children, Trafficking Victims, and Medical Emergencies, among others, exempt from authority. Here is the article. Unaccompanied children, victims of a severe form of trafficking, those who present an acute medical emergency or an imminent and extreme threat to life and safety, among select others, are among the exemptions carved out under the new move from the Biden administration. Migrants can still request an appointment through the Customs and Border Protection mobile application known as CBP-1 to present their asylum claim at a port of entry. And that is the end of that third article. I wish sometimes that before embarking on this legislation, that they would ask people like me who live right along the U.S.-Mexican border, in my case, just 2 miles from it. 2 miles. I can be there in 3 or 4 minutes. There is a bridge crossing over the Rio Grande River. It does not go to a very populated place, so very few people cross over that bridge from the U.S. to Mexico. The most populated area is Reynosa, which, as I mentioned yesterday, is about a 10-minute drive from here. The place I go to is Nuevo Progreso, which is about a 30-minute drive from here. I park on the right-hand side of the road and cross over on foot into Mexico. Some people drive across. The problem with that, although I have considered that, is that once you cross into Mexico, your auto insurance is no longer valid. Maybe there is a way to get a supplemental policy so that you can have insurance in Mexico, but why would I bother with it if I can park on the U.S. side and in just 2 minutes walk across the bridge and be in the Nuevo Progreso? There's no point to it. So I just park on the U.S. side and walk across. It is much safer because when you drive across to Mexico, there is a much greater chance that your car will be stolen. That aside, if they asked me, what do I think? Well, I suppose you could probably all guess what I would say. As a Maoist-Third worldist, I would say tear down the borders. Much as Ronald Reagan said in a much different context, tear down that wall. Tear down the borders. Not only the border between the U.S. and Mexico, but the borders between all countries. Problem, there is no one with the authority to issue that order. It would be nice if the United Nations had that authority, but it clearly does not. And so we are left in a quagmire as usual. At least people like me who would like to see borders become a thing of the past. It will not happen, at least not now. And I think now is when it is most urgently needed in a time of massive international unrest, possible uprisings in the United States, war in Greater West Asia, in Ukraine, and elsewhere in the world. What more appropriate time could there be than now to eliminate all national borders everywhere in the world and to make the world a single global commonwealth? Not to destroy national cultures. Cultures can still maintain themselves, much as they do in the EU. In the EU, countries exist, cultures exist, languages in those countries exist, but if you are in the EU, you can cross over into any country at will, but you know that you are crossing into another country with its own distinct culture. That to me is a good thing. Now, does that mean that I support the EU? No, not exactly. The EU is a capitalist entity. So for that reason, since the EU is basically a part of the capitalist world system, as that term was used by Immanuel Wallerstein, the sociologist, the respected sociologist, unlike me, not a very well-respected sociologist, not a very well-known sociologist, but Wallerstein is, and he coined that term, and it is a very accurate term, I think, to describe the current state of the world. But there is no way really to change that. We are locked into a system which simply does not work. It does not work. And we see evidence of that all over the world. There is no need to provide evidence. The evidence is all around us. It is right in front of us. It is behind us. It is to our right. It is to our left. It is on every side that we are exposed to. The problems inherent in the current world order, and how great it would be to see that world order, that capitalist world system, come crumbling down right before my eyes. I did not think I would live to see this day, but I believe, and this is only a speculation, not a prediction, but I believe with all my heart that the capitalist world system will come down much sooner than I thought. I suspected it might be 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, maybe even 1,000 years. But now, looking at the events that are unfolding around the world, I no longer think so. And I have no basis for making that statement, no evidence. There is nothing I can show you that would tell you why I feel that way, because I can't prove that to myself. It is my heart. It is my heart speaking to my brain. And in my heart, I feel very, very strongly that the capitalist world system does not have that much longer. And it will come down very, very soon. How soon? That would be a prediction. And I do not want to make predictions because generally my predictions are wrong. Not even generally. Always my predictions are wrong. So without making a prediction, I will simply say that I feel as though the capitalist world system is on the verge of collapsing. And I base that on my own observations as a sociologist of the world as it is right now. Reading the news, looking at what world leaders are saying, examining the relations between countries, looking at the relation and the relations between the first world on the one hand and the third and fourth worlds on the other. And I can only conclude that this world that I live in does not have that much more time. I watched a YouTube video yesterday which showed the likely targets if Russia were to attack the United States. Those targets do not include where I live, but they do include an area maybe 4 or 5 hours away from me, Houston. Houston is a likely target. Where I live is so remote, although it is built up, but it's still remote. Hardly anybody comes down here. That will likely change as the interstate system begins to unfold to include this area. As of now, there is an interstate down here, actually 2 of them, but they are not connected to the rest of the interstate system. That will change fairly soon. But the targets right now for Russia do not include the area in which I am living. Do I care? No, I don't care about that. All I care about is that the capitalist world system ends. And if it ends soon, then I will be happy. If it does not end soon, then I will be sad, because seeing this kind of horrendous situation that is existing in terms of Borderlands is painful. It is literally painful for me. As an autistic, when I was a kid, it was painful for me to look into the eyes of another person. Many autistics have problems looking at people directly in the eyes. That problem went away by the time of my late teens. Why it was painful, I don't know. But when I would try to gaze into the eyes of someone, I couldn't. I would not see that person's eyes. It was like I was looking at 2 bright suns. 2 bright suns. And the closer I would get to the person's eyes, the brighter those suns would become. It was very tragic, and it illustrates the kind of separation, the demi-reality, the splitting, which autistics experience with the outside world. I don't have that problem anymore, thank goodness. And yet I see the splitting in the world around me, which is worse than the problem I had as a kid. And so as a Maoist-Third worldist, I can only hope from the bottom of my heart that borders will become a thing of the past. They are outdated and antiquated. They no longer belong in any civilized country. To be civilized, in my view, in the modern world, is to reject borders. Reject them completely. Even though I can't tear down borders myself, I reject them in my head, in my heart, in my soul. They are not a part of my consciousness. I realize that I am alone, or relatively alone, in that sentiment. Most people where I live here, I assume, would not feel that way. Although, surprisingly, people here are not generally in support of these kinds of draconian Machiavellian measures to seal up the border. Why? Well, for a number of reasons, but one is because many Mexican Americans here have family on the other side of the border. They do not want to be further cut off from their relatives. Another is that those of us down here know that the problem that is painted by legislators and by the president is not as bad as what it actually is. there is certainly a problem. There are problems, like with the cartels. But is the problem quite as bad as government officials make it out to be? No, it is not. I have never had a problem being 2 miles from the border. Nobody I know in my condo complex that I've spoken with has had a problem either. Living here, in most respects, is like living anywhere in the United States. You can be totally oblivious to the fact that you are only 2 miles from Mexico. And yet, when I have said that to my friends who live elsewhere in the United States, they are startled by that. I have received calls from people who have said to me, "Are you okay? We heard about some incidents along the border." And my response has always been, "You are the first person to tell me that." And that is true. Then I will get off the phone. I will look up what the person said, and I will find the story. But it is so insignificant here. Nobody that I know of here pays any attention to that subject. Yet outside of the borderlands between the US and Mexico on the American side, many people, especially on the far right, appear to pay attention to it all the time, even though it really is not that serious an issue. And I wish that these people would come to terms with that they are fighting for something that they think is a serious problem. But in reality, it is hardly a problem at all. For the time being, this has been Mark, by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.